We learned about these before, how this translates on the lowest level into four elements in the animal soul. The four elements are fire, water, air, and earth, and how these affect our emotions. And we learned how these four elements also play themselves out in our godly soul. So the fire in the godly soul will lead to enthusiasm and warmth and davening and learning. And water in the godly soul will lead to the feeling of tremendous pleasure, excitement, and a godly idea. And the element of air in the godly soul will be learning and teaching and saying good things, encouraging good things. And the element of earth in the animal soul is a feeling of drudgery, laziness, and depression. But in the godly soul, it's a very, very great thing. What is it? What is the element of earth in the godly soul? Humility. Humility. All right? And we have all of these elements on every level. So we have three levels of the soul. Nefesh, lowest level, which is the life, basic energy life. Ruach, which is more connected with our feelings, world of Yetzirah. And Bria, the highest world, the world of creation, where creation begins. We see what is creation. We see something is created. Higher than that, you don't see any creation. You only see God. And there are souls on each level, depending on their connection to the Torah and connection to tzaddik. And we learn this very, very important idea. How do we fulfill the mitzvah of cleaving to God? How can you cleave to God? You can't see God. And the answer the sages give us in chapter 2 from the Talmud is that a person will cleave to the tzaddik. So he's cleaving to the source of life because that's embodied in the tzaddik, because the tzaddik is cleaving to God. Okay? Quick review. That was a quick review. Now we're finishing up chapter 2. What about the other side? Let's take a look here. Page 62. Through attachment to the tzaddik, the nefesh, ruach, and the shama of an ordinary person, the rank and file person, becomes bound up and united with its original essence and root in the highest level of wisdom of God. By this chain-like connection of levels. Since Hashem and his wisdom are one thing, the bottom of page 62. Now comes the question, what about people who don't connect themselves with the tzaddik? What about people who fight against the tzaddik? Well, in a way, they're cutting themselves off from the source of their life. That's a logical conclusion, isn't it? And there are stories about people who were succeeded and people who didn't succeed. What do I mean succeeded? They succeeded to rescue themselves. Like the famous story that the Rebbe tells of the Ramban. Who is the Ramban? You have Rambam. That's Moshe Maimonides. Rambam. And the Ramban is Nachmanides, the son of Nachman. So he was a great teacher, and there was an apostate in his times who became a powerful person in the non-Jewish government, I believe in Portugal. And he persecuted the Jewish people terribly, did terrible things. And his life terminated with the following story, that he called the Ramban to come to him on Yom Kippur, carrying with him things. And what did he do? He shechted a non-kosher animal and cooked it on Yom Kippur and ate it. The Ramban said to him, how did you sink so low? How did you do it? How did this happen to you? You're a Jew. And he said, it's because of you. Because you taught us that every person's name is to be found in the parsha, one of the last parshas of Devarim is Ha'azinu. My name is Avner. It's not in Azinu. And the Ramban said, well, he said, where is my name? Show me where's my name. And Ramban said, well, if you'll give me a minute, let me think about it, see if we can find it. And so he thought, he reviewed the parsha in his mind. It's not a long parsha. He reviewed it, and he said, here is your name. He said, what do you mean? It says, the pasuk is, Amarti afehem, I said in my anger, as Hashem is speaking now, Amarti afehem, Ashbisa mi'enesh zichram. Ashbisa, the root of the word is Shabbos. I will cause to rest, that's to say to be non-existent. Ashbisa me'enosh, from mankind. Ashbisa zichray, his memory. The third letter of each of these words spells out Reish Avner. Reish Avner. Amarti Afehem Ashbisa Mienesh Zichron. I will cause the memory of his name to perish. He realized that his whole life had been based on a mistake. He said, the same way my name isn't in the parsha, you taught us something false. Everything you taught was false. And I threw it all, I separated myself from it. And that's the life I led. What do I do now? And I was humbled. So what do I do now? So the Ramban said to him, fulfill your pasuk. Fulfill your own pasuk. He was broken like a match, just like that. Spirit broke, his rebellious spirit broke. He stumbled down to the port, took a boat, sailed out, or rowed out, whatever it was. It doesn't say what kind of boat it was, but he was never heard of again. And so the Rebbe pointed out that the third letter in the first word is Amarti, is a Reish, that his name became now Reish, Reb Avner, because the deep tshuva that he did was so deep that it retroactively elevated all of the terrible things that he had done, because they became the driving force of his tshuva. It's the tremendous power of tshuva. So that's an answer to this question. What about a person who willfully sins against God? Well, that's Avner. That's what he did. But in the end, he did tshuva. And there are a number of stories like this. The Rebbe spoke about one of them and said, every time he comes back, every time there's a reincarnation, it always ends the same way. Well, the person leads a very negative life and then does an overwhelming teshuvah and dies. So it always ends the same way. And in the Alter Rebbe's case, where someone had come to him, a secular mathematician, he came to the Alter Rebbe because he heard he was great in mathematics. And the Alter Rebbe just flipped through his work and said, you made a mistake here. You made a mistake. I said, what? A mistake? You made a fundamental mistake. And also he experienced the same spiritual snap and internal breakage, and he died. He went down to the base of Medrash, he sat down, he started to weep, and he wept and wept and wept till he died. Alter Rebbe's brother came and said, what did you do to him? He said, this is the same neshama, and every time it always ends the same way. And he said, this was the last time. This is his last time around. So here's the question, page 62. What about people who willfully sin and rebel against God by rebelling against the sages of the sender generation? People who fight the Torah. When the Rebbe says that young girls should light a Shabbos candle, and there were certain teachers in Rosh Yeshivas who said, no, you don't have to do it. They fought against it. If your mother didn't do it, you shouldn't do it. And the Rebbe was doing this because he was trying to save the Jewish people from the Yom Kippur War. To find merits in the Jewish people. When one of these great so-called greats of the generation came out against the campaign for Jewish children to light a Shabbos candle at the age of 3, and he was very vocal about it, so the Baba Sali said, who is this fly who wants to start up with the great eagle in the sky? The Nesher HaGodol Shabashamayim. He referred to the Rebbe as the Nesher HaGodol Shabashamayim, the great eagle in the heavens. So what happens to people who willfully sin against Torah sages, which is, the Torah doesn't say anything against it. It's not, the God wouldn't say himself. So page 63. Uniquest, see again, the same sentence structure. Uniquest nefesh, ruach, and neshama. The nefesh, ruach, and neshama from them, yonik, where yonik means to nurse, like a baby nurses. Yeah. Shalahem, the nurture of their life comes mi bechines achoraim. Now we've learned about upper and lower levels. Panemius and chetzenius. Panemius is the root of the word face. When you give someone something with a loving smile, it expresses your love and connection to them. And if you don't want to have anything to do with them, you give them something like this. The expression is kalachar yad. Kalachar yad, with the back of your hand. It's the same expression in English, a backhanded compliment. Did you go to that performance? Yeah, they say it was really good. Ha ha. Like, it's quite clear you don't mean it. Especially the lead actor. Was he ever good? Like a toothache. That's the idea of achorayim. The achora means the back. So they get their life from the backside. People who rebel against Torah get their life from the backside. I remember I was working on campus, and there was a lot of Jewish kids on campus, like 5,000 to 10,000 Jewish kids. And there was a Jewish boy from Long Island who was a very smart boy, and he was running the campus newspaper, and they brought in a lot of money. A lot of people advertised in it. The advertising brought in a lot of money. And I took him matzahs before Pesach. And he said, I'm going to have them for supper tonight. I said, no, they're for Pesach. He says, I'm going to eat them for supper. And if that's a sin, let the Almighty strike me dead now. He went like that. Well, Hashem didn't strike him dead at that point. But it will come along. He'll get his, what they call his comeuppance later. So when a person does that, so the energy that comes into his nefesh, ruach, and neshama comes not with a loving thing that can be appreciated, but it comes from the backside. Like you would throw a dog a bone, like, here, take this. A person makes a feast for his best friends and relatives and ministers, and the people in the kitchen get to eat all the good food, but the feast wasn't made for the people in the kitchen, and the dogs get the leftovers. So when you get life with the yanika, the nurture is from the backside. It's like the dogs getting the leftovers after the feast. That's what it says here. From the hinder part, they get their life. Nevertheless, even those who rebel against the sages receive some measure of spiritual nourishment from them, for every soul, without exception, must be bound up with its root and source, which is the highest level of Chachma and Atzilus. So we have Panemius is with love from the face, and Chitzonius or achorayim is from the back. It's just you don't see anything. You just see the back. Okay. Now we have a question. After the diggly thing in the middle of the page, what about what it says in the Zohar? Now the Zohar is the source of all of this stuff. And in the Zohar Chadash, another volume, that is an essential factor in the birth of children. We spoke about the father's thought is the birth of the child, causes the birth of the child. Is that a person having a family, when a husband and wife have a family, it's crucial that they should conduct themselves in a holy manner. And in that way, they draw down a soul with very great sensitivity to holiness in intellect and feelings and behavior, which is why we see by the children of great tzaddikim that the children themselves are very great. Remember the story I told you about the game that the Rebbe Rashab played with his older brother, and how they played Rebbe and Chassid. They were 4 and 5 years old, but they spoke like mature Hasidim. So now looking at things from the other side, this is not the case, however, with the children of people who grow up with no knowledge of Torah and mitzvahs. Rank and file people, which if you look at the whole history of the Jewish people, it's very interesting that a whole generation of scholars and great Hasidim were wiped out in the Holocaust. Millions of great people. Who are the survivors? I'm not generalizing about everybody, but in the overall scheme of things, the survivors of the Holocaust are those who ran away and survived. Just they knew it's time to get out and they left, but they didn't have knowledge. They came to America. There were no communities for them. There were very few shuls. They went to a place where there was no kashrus, no mikvahs. And they didn't know better because they grew up in very poor families. My grandfather, for instance, was born in Poland. They had no food. They were poor. So his family sent him to Lodz, which was a big city like New York. They put him out, which means that they boarded him with a family. But the family had no food. So they sent him to the yeshiva there, to the cheder. The cheder should feed. Cheder had no money. Little boy was starving. So he went and he got a job in the factory. So he became a socialist. After the Russian Revolution came from Jewish kids who grew up and said, "The heck with all this. We'll go make a new order." And he was became one of the founding fathers of the workman's circle, what they called in Yiddish the outer ring. That's how Judaism survived. That's why our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, so many of them, good people, good people, with strong values of right and wrong, wanting to make a better world. You know, there was a guy in our community, his name was Willie Wagman, the Wagman brothers. They became very wealthy. They were smart, they worked hard, they became wealthy, and they were very nice people. So this one person I knew, Willie Wagman, he said to me, "What are you doing?" I'm going to college. "What are you studying in college?" "I'm studying English." He says, "Why do you study English? It's such an easy language." So this is not the case that the children born of such a union do not have these super sensitive silken garments of thought and feeling with which to serve God. Continuing, in the middle of the page, 64. Mishum she'ein lecha nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Any person, the nefesh, ruach, and neshama that this person has, she'ein loy levush, it has every level of your soul needs clothing. Just you got dressed this morning and you put on your clothing and you made choices about which clothing you're going to wear, and you saw your wardrobe and say, oh yeah, these are clothes, I don't wear these anymore. I go to Machon Liyadus. I wear a different kind of clothing. I wear more modest clothing. And your neshama also needs clothing. What is the clothing of the neshama? Every neshama, nefesh needs clothing, the ruach needs clothing, the neshama needs clothing. And what is the clothing? They are garments. And these garments that the neshama acquires from conception, they come from the essence of life in the father and the mother. So therefore, parents are urged to sanctify themselves in marriage, to give their child a good head start, to get into Yale and Harvard, so to speak, of the yeshiva world, of the world of servants serving God. Which you don't have to be in yeshiva to serve God. Let's qualify that. Person doesn't go to yeshiva doesn't mean he can't serve God. V'chol ha-mitzvahs, now this is the extraordinary thing, all the mitzvahs that a person is going to do will have to be performed with those garments. Like if a person is born right-handed, he's not going to do things left-handed. Because this is the inclination of his nefesh. Since his nefesh is right-handed, he can't make it left-handed. Some people are born left-handed, they can become ambidextrous, right-handed and left-handed. And similarly, some people are born with a sensitivity to holiness. They like, some kids come to the Chabad house, they love it. Other kids, they feel like a fish out of water. They feel, oh, what am I doing here? They're so remote from it. But that's, the fact that you go one time, it makes it easier to go again. And eventually, the neshama begins to recognize that this is really a good place to be. And these feelings and responses, they are implanted in the nefesh by the parents when they're having children. And implanted in the nefesh, which is close to the body, closest, I think, to the body, spiritual level close to the body, and in the ruach, which is the closest thing to the feelings that you develop. Some people are born athletic, coordinated, and some people are born awkward and clumsy. So the athletic person is going to excel in the world of athletics. Some people are born with intellectual abilities. I had kids in my class, they just understood how to do every single question in mathematics. They just understood the most difficult problems were just easy for them. And the rest of us struggled to figure out what was going on. So all the mitzvahs, now this applies spiritually, that all the good deeds that you're going to do, they have to be done with the faculties, with the talents that you're going to get from your parents. That's where it's going to come from. So the brilliant people give over their intellectual brilliance to their children. Not always, but it's very likely. And people who are really kind people, they give over their kindness and their love of doing kind things to their children. But a lot of people who love doing kind things aren't always so smart. And some people who are very smart aren't very good at doing kind things. And these are these garments for the nefesh, ruach, and neshama. They're with you for life. They're with you for life. And every good thing you're going to do is going to be through these garments. Does that mean that there's no hope? What if I have crude garments? And I don't have sensitivity for holy things. So he goes on. I'll come to your question in a minute, Isa. These garments are garments of thinking, garments of feeling, and garments of doing. And everything that we're going to think and say and do is through these garments that come to us from our parents. And he goes on even a step further. Sometimes people get an inspiration. They're very different from their parents. Sometimes you get kids come to the Chabad house and the parents freak out. We're not like that in our family. And they become extremely, extremely upset and resentful. Sometimes they get over it. Sometimes they don't. Because they're missing that sensitivity. And the child somehow got it. Maybe the Alta Baba was praying, Hashem, I have a great grandchild. She's going to college. Please, Hashem, watch over her. And someone says, maybe he'll come to Chabad house Friday night. No, maybe another time. But then the other time comes and it's fun. She becomes a regular. One girl that many of you know her, a powerhouse of a girl, came from a very not religious background, but her mother called her Erev Yom Kippur and said, listen, it's your grandfather's yard site. Go to some Jewish place and say Kaddish. Well, women don't go to say Kaddish for grandfathers. So she went to the Chabad house. And she liked it so much that she turned the whole place over. She brought more kids from her Chabad house than in the whole, Pagisha weekend. She became like a general. So all the good deeds and all the mitzvahs a person is going to do are going to go through these garments. And even when Hashem shines a light upon this boy or on this girl and they get inspired, that's an influence from heaven. That's not so much from the parents, or we're leaping over the parents. It's from great-grandparents or even more. But that also, even a heavenly influence, it happens sometimes. The Rebbe thinks about somebody and they get in. You walk down the street and all of a sudden you're thinking about the Rebbe. Where did that come from? Where? Why? What's the Rebbe want from me? I don't know who is. People get inspired and come to the Rebbe and they say, I can't get over this. I've been seeing you in my dreams. There's a story I heard once about a person became religious, became Hasidic, wanted to grow a beard. His wife was desperately opposed to it. And one morning she woke up, she said, you know what? I dreamt that the Rebbe told me I should let you grow your beard. He grew his beard. So even the benevolence that flows from heaven has to come through this same garment. And if a person will sanctify himself and herself, they will elicit a holy garment in the neshama of the child that will be born. Okay, Ms. Isa.
Hi, so my question is, it says if the person sanctifies himself or herself, and then it follows saying that it needs the father's sanctification at the time of union. What does that mean, sanctification?
What is what?
What is person sanctifies himself?
I can't hear you.
It says a person has to sanctify
Yeah.
himself. What does that mean?
What does it mean? Do as many good things as you can. Give tzedakah.
It says
Like giving tzedakah before lighting a Shabbos candle. Give tzedakah. If you know something, Tanya by heart. Review some Tanya you learned by heart. Learn an extra 10 minutes in a shir. Do something extra for the sake of Hashem. So you put yourself more in the holy mode, in harmony with holiness. Don't just have a good time. Try and be holy in having a good time. Try and do it in a holy way, in a modest way, in a quiet way. Sometimes, we're exposed to a lot of things in the movies and television and so on. People say, is this okay? They say to the college teacher, is this okay? And the fact that they're asking if this is okay means they already know that it's not really the right way to do things. Everything, a lot of centers around beauty in the world today. But the Torah says the first set of Torah of tablets were given with a lot of thunder and lightning and in a most impressive way, and they didn't last. They broke, and people had to do a big time tshuva for many, many months. And then the second set of tablets were given on Yom Kippur, quietly. And at this point, the sages say, because the most beautiful thing in the world is modesty. And I know people who refused a shidduch because they felt that the girl wasn't really all that modest. And similarly, the other way. However, the soul itself is something totally different. The garments of the soul come from the parents, but the soul itself comes from God. And sometimes a soul from a very, very high level, a soul which is rooted in the highest levels of godliness, will come down to be a child of parents who are illiterate. Now the time is up. We have to go. But famous story that the previous Rebbe wrote in the memoirs about parents, 2 orphans who had rudimentary Jewish education, and the community had pity on them, but they were good kids. They were good kids. They didn't know anything, and they married them off, and they devoted. But they had good. They came from good stock. They were both orphans from an early age, like 2-3 years old. But their parents, unbeknownst to them, were tzaddikim, hidden tzaddikim. One of them was martyred to protect the Jewish community. The other one had a different story. And these 2 kids who knew nothing about Yiddishkeit and barely knew how to read Hebrew, but they devoted themselves to whatever they could do in holiness. Like the woman, the mother, the wife used to bake challahs and take them to the shul for the poor people to have food for Shabbos. And she used to save pennies from the knitting that she did to buy candles, because they didn't have lights in the shuls those days. They had to buy candles. It's expensive. She said that every penny would be devoted to holiness. And they had this family, and this husband and this wife, 2 orphans, who were devoted to trying to do. Why do they have this devotion? Because that's the goodness that came through their parents, was the devotion. But the neshama itself was a very, very high neshama. And great tzaddikim came from them. Reb Elimelech of Lezhinsk and Reb Zusha of Anipol, who wrote the introduction to the Tanya here, saying it's a good book, you should read it. He was a colleague. They were from the time of the Alter Rebbe. But they were born into very, very crude, simple families. So therefore, the sages say in the Talmud, we should always pay attention to the children of poor families, because great Torah could come from them. The soul itself sometimes happens, is the closing lines of the chapter, that a soul of infinite loftiness comes down to be the soul of unlearned people, sadly lacking in Torah and mitzvahs because they don't even know any better. Can't do a mitzvah, you don't even know how to do it. And all this is explained by the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, who's in Sfas. If you go to Israel in Sfas, you can visit his kever and say a prayer of blessed memory, as explained in Likutei Torah on Parshas Vayera and Parshas Bereshis. Why is this explained in those Parshas? Because Vayera is about, we just read it, about the birth of Yitzchak. Birth of Yitzchak. So it's an appropriate place to speak about things. And Bereshis is about the creation of Adam and Chava. So that's why thematically that fits in right here. Tomorrow we start chapter 3. Bezras Hashem. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
10 o'clock, girls. Geh schlafen. Go to sleep. Except for bringing all night. Remember, when you're troubled by doubts and misgivings, the sages tell us what you have to do. You have to take the Yetzer Hara by the collar and schlep the Yetzer Hara into the Cholayadus. Well, it says the Talmud into the yeshiva. It's the same thing. That gets rid of all the problems. Don't indulge in the problem. Don't try to argue with the Yetzer Hara. It's just a trick. Get you involved. You know, it's a person who goes into a bakery always comes up with flour items. Don't wrestle with the Yetzer Hara.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Just do good. Just do good.
Good job.